All right, my friends, we have a late midnight live stream. I wanted to bring James Larson on here because he did an awesome review of the PSB Synchrony B600 bookshelf speakers. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. How are you doing, James?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
You know, it's been a while since I've had you on to talk about your reviews, and I know you're working on a lot of different products, and you were pretty excited about these speakers. I think you were telling me that, you know, they're about half the price of the Revel F or the B126BEs,
Yeah.
but you were kind of saying that they could give it some competition,
Oh,
right? I mean,
absolutely. I think they give it some strong competition. Yeah. I mean, they have their advantages. Each have their respective advantages. But yeah, these are a lower cost speaker, but they're really good.
well, let me show the slide presentation here. And guys, the article itself is on audioholics.com. It's like the third article down on the left side. I'll link it up in the video description. James puts a lot of effort into not only measuring the speakers, he takes them outdoors, but the listening tests. So I want to go over these, pretty much focus on the measurements in this, and then we'll talk about, you know, what you heard. So one thing that's unusual about the speakers, it looks like it's upside down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Though it does look like it's upside down with the tweeter. Normally, speakers have the tweeter, or bookshelf speakers have the tweeter over the bass driver or the midwoofer, and these don't do that. Yeah. So I mean, it's a little unusual, but I think that only real speaker like audio nerds would really catch that, and like normal people would probably not even really know or care.
Did they ever give you a reason why they do that?
No. No, not that I can recall. No. I mean, they're fine. It doesn't really affect anything actually. So it's like it's okay. This doesn't, they perform well. So
Yeah.
yeah, but they work. You can't complain really when you look at the actual performance. You have to going over the specs. Yeah, a frequency response. It does dig down very well down to 50 hertz, 50 to 20 kilohertz. It
Right.
has a 6.5 inch carbon fiber woofer, and a lot of like other details. You can look at the article. It's a 1-inch titanium dome tweeter and fourth order acoustic crossover. So it's got really good components. It's got like a brushed aluminum front baffle. It's got some isoacoustics like feet.
Oh, I didn't see that. They come with the isoacoustic speed, or is that
Yeah,
a separate purchase?
no, they're on the unit itself. So yeah, no, they come with them, and they're pretty good feet. They're heavy duty. They're well built. These ones are glass. Obviously you can see they're glass. They're piano like black gloss, but they come in oil. Yeah, they can also you can also be had in walnut, like a satin walnut, not a
Right.
gloss walnut. But I have one right behind me. If you can see, this one has
Yeah,
this
let me
grill
zoom in
on.
on you.
Yeah, here's the grill. And you can see the speaker behind me. It's a nice looking speaker. It's not really like super stylish, for like some high end speakers are like really kind of like over styled. This one is very like restrained, conservative in its styling. So I like it. And I think if you don't want a speaker that draws attention to itself, the B600 is a good one. Any of the Synchrony PSP Synchrony speakers are. So yeah, yeah, there she is. It's a nice, and it's well built. It's just a good
Sounds
speaker.
Yeah, it sounds rigid. So is that the smallest of that series, or is there a smaller model?
That's the smallest. They have a bookshelf speaker, 2 tower speakers, and I think a center. I'm not sure about that. Maybe not. But yeah, they have 2 towers, and they're both much bigger and quite a bit more expensive. Yeah. So, and they're all
Okay.
really good. I heard their new tower of the series. I forgot what it was called.
Yeah, did you hear that at Expona or no?
Yeah, the new tower that I forgot what it was called exactly. The T800
Yeah,
or
I think I
900.
remember 800.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's $12,000 though. I mean, it's expensive, but yeah, I heard it, and it's really good. So I mean, these are really good. So that's what you would expect. And those are like
Yeah.
this, except add like 3 more bass drivers with like variable port tuning, and it's a cool speaker. But that's if you got 12,000, got 12 large. Okay, these are not. These are like 2,400 a pair. So
just
a lot
get
more.
these and get some kick-ass subs, and you're
Exactly.
going to be right
Much
up
better.
there.
Much better value proposition. So here's a picture with them with and without grills. They look nice. And you can't really complain. They're very conservatively styled. You can't really complain about their looks too much. I guess maybe if you're spending this much, maybe some people want a little bit more wilder looking speakers, but these aren't wild looking.
I'll be honest, it looks clean to me, and $2,200 is pretty reasonable from what I'm seeing and what you were talking about, what's in this thing. So
pictures of the carbon fiber woofer, the titanium dome tweeter. It has a little waveguide on it and a little like phase plug type thing.
yeah,
There's a picture of the rear of the speaker. One complaint, my only complaint about the speaker really is those binding posts. They're not very
what's
good.
going on with those couplers that they put on the jumpers?
The jumpers are bad. The binding posts, they have these little slots that you insert the jumpers through. And then if you insert the jumpers through those slots, you can't insert anything else through those slots, like spades or bare wire even. So then the only way to connect these speakers is through banana plugs. And then you have to take those little tabs out of the end
I
of those
hate
things.
those tabs. I see a lot of companies use them, and sometimes you have to use like a little needle nose plier to get them out.
That's exactly sometimes they're fine. They're little rubber tabs. Sometimes you can get them easy, but that wasn't the case. I struggled to get the tabs out of these binding posts. And so that's the one complaint I have about these speakers. It's not a big deal. Once you've got that taken care of, it's not a big deal. But yeah, the binding posts they're over designed. So oh well. But once you're past that, it's all good news as far as I'm concerned. Okay, yeah. I normally have a slide before the measurements that shows the outdoor conditions, but I don't know. I think I forgot to
Yeah, I
take a
think you
picture.
forgot. So before you say this, just so you guys know, anyone that watches the channel already knows this, but if you're new, James actually takes these products, brings them outside, puts them up on a pole or like a stand, and then rotates it and does all the measurements outdoors. And that removes the variable of the room. So you're actually measuring the response of the speaker, and it's not dependent on what's going on in the room acoustics, because the room at lower frequencies especially dominates what you're going to measure in a speaker.
Yeah, for like, I put them essentially in an anechoic condition.
Right.
So I'm measuring them without any EU for the speaker plugs. That's true. I've heard that. So
Brandon's right about this. I reviewed the Infinity Primus. That's the first time I encountered these damn little clips on the back of the binding post, and I couldn't get them off of those.
Yeah, like I said, it's an EU safety thing. Like you can't, so you don't mix them up with some kind of electrical thing in the EU. So they had that as a safety feature. Anyways, yeah. So we put these up there, and I measure them in an anechoic condition, essentially anechoic. And like these measure really good. They're not perfect.
Yeah.
There's there's a little notch there at like just above a kilohertz. Other than that, though, it's really good. And it gets a little rocky above like 15 kilohertz, but who cares?
Well, I mean that dip you get at like, what is that, like 15 kilohertz? Isn't that because of the phase plug on the tweeter?
That might be, or it might be because I'm sure it has something to do with it, but it also could be the waveguide. That the waveguide is pretty simple on that thing, and so or combined with some diffraction at the edges. So, but all that like misbehavior happens at such a high frequency that it doesn't really matter. So as far as I'm concerned, if there's flaws like above 15 kilohertz, it doesn't matter because
I can't hear above 15K anymore anyway. So
most people who would buy these have lost their hearing above 15K, and plus there's not a lot of recorded content out that higher frequency, so it's not a problem. So, but below that, look at the mids. It's just a straight line. It's really good, and it's all very good. It's not perfect, but and look at the directivity indexes. Hopefully Gene comes back there. Look, the directivity indexes are basically straight lines too. So that means you can EQ these very reliably. The equalization will take, and anything you do to EQ them will have a very predictable response, and as an end result. So there's a lot of good stuff going on here.
So that James raises a good point. When a speaker is linear like this and the off-axis responses behave, you could apply EQ and it'll actually work. Whereas if a speaker has ragged response, then the EQ could potentially make things worse, not better.
Yeah, and so a speaker like this takes very well to say automated EQ systems like Odyssey or YPAO or the more simpler
Yeah.
automated EQ systems. This speaker reacts very well to us, of course, as well as more sophisticated ones like Dirac or Trinoff. So
Yep.
it's really good. And here you can kind of get a sense. Here's a profile picture. You can kind of get a sense of how the off-axis energy is behaving with respect to the on-axis.
So this is a 3D plot of on-axis versus how many degrees do you go around the speaker?
This is 90. So this is the full front hemisphere
Yeah.
of the horizontal hemisphere. So like it's the off-axis responses have pretty good correlation to the on-axis response, and there you can see what's going on at the on-axis response at above 15K. It really beams hard at such a high frequency, but still, if you're on axis at that frequency, it's not even. It's still you're gonna hit with plenty of that high frequency upper treble energy. So like it's pretty linear. This is a pretty linear and well-behaved speaker, with respect to most speakers, even with respect to speakers at its own price point. And this is kind of an expensive speaker at $2,400 a pair, so it's not cheap, but it's good,
Yep.
There's like a 3D representation, so you can see how you can get a better look at how each angle kind of compares to the adjacent angles, So like yeah, it's very good. I've seen better. I'm not saying this is perfect. I have seen better, but this is pretty darn good. And yeah, it's a linear speaker. It's relatively accurate. If you buy these, you're going to get an accurate sound reproduction for the most part.
Okay.
And there's the polar map. This is it's kind of looks at how the energy dissipates at off-axis angles over a broader view, and like it's directivity, the dispersion control is pretty good. It's not perfect. It does shrink a little bit at what is that? I think 5 kilohertz, but it's fine. In the tweeters band, it like or not well a little bit in the upper band. It kind of like beams a little bit, but it's pretty well behaved. If you're at like what is that 50 hertz or not 50, 50 degrees within a 50-degree angle, you're going to be hit with a pretty even and balanced like amount of like spectral energy across the frequency band. So it'll sound good at out to 50 degrees. So it covers a wide angle with a good full balanced sound. That's what this like graph is telling you. Oh, here's that same.
So here's the vertical measurements now, right?
Yeah, this is up or down, and this is not as important for this to be even and smooth. And speakers rarely have an even or smooth like vertical, out to it. But what this does say is that out to like a 10 degree, like plus or minus 10 degrees, maybe even up to 15. This has a pretty even amount of energy, and most people, the vast majority of listeners, are within a 10 degree, cone. Up or down of.
So is the axis summation like at the woofer, or is it slightly above the tweeter?
The axis is actually on this speaker. I measured this at the tweeter, but the axis is actually the woofer. But you can listen to the on the tweeter axis pretty good. It's just not quite as perfect as the woofer. It's not quite as perfect.
So why did you measure it at the tweeter instead of the woofer?
Because I normally do, and I only found out after I measured the speaker that the woofer is really the I mean, I compared like the 5-degree angle to the 0-degree angle. If you were listening at like negative five or what is it? Yeah, the plus 5-degree angle, you were on the woofer axis pretty much, right? And it's actually a dead flat response. And the tweeter angle, it's mostly like all the graphs you saw, that was tweeter angle. But if you go up and you listen on the woofer's axis, it's actually flatter than that. So it's like really good, right? It's like
so in reality, when you're setting these speakers up, you want to probably have the ear level be at the woofer, not the tweeter, like we normally would recommend on most conventional speakers.
Yes, that's right. I mean, to get a perfect optimal listening like axis for these speakers, have your ears be on the woofer like height, not the tweeter height. It doesn't make that big of a difference though. Just the woofer is just a little bit. It's probably not even audible, to be honest. But I mean, but like academically, it's a flatter, more neutral response. However that translates audibly, I don't think it would be a big deal. But that I measured this on the tweeter axis, and it measures really well. I just did one measurement of the woofer axis, and it was like even better. So, they're just good speakers. Here's the low end. And one of the big draws of the speaker is it has a very good bass response, all the way down to 40 hertz.
That's pretty unusual for a small speaker like that, but can it play reasonably loud?
I think so. I think, but people have different definitions of reasonably loud as. From my taste, they get reasonably loud, but I think, I don't think you would want to put them in a large room.
Yeah.
They're not that loud, but they get pretty. I mean, most people would probably be very happy with them in a medium to small room. In a large room, they'd probably get lost in, especially the
Well,
bass.
I'm talking about more for the bass standpoint, because you could make a small speaker you could tune a small speaker down to 40 hertz, but if you play it at any reason, I've seen speakers tuned to 40 hertz bookshelf speakers, and you play it above 70 dB and they bottom out.
Like this will do better than that. In a large room, you would want a sub. I think in a medium-sized room, you'd want you could probably get by, and if you were listening to play acoustic music and not like some crazy party music, right? You could get by without a sub. But if you were listening to, like, say, heavy duty like pipe organ music or electronic music, you'd want a sub. Or movies, you'd probably want a sub with these. But for the normal people, they would be perfectly happy with these without a sub.
Does this measurement include the port response?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
Okay.
That's the port and the woofer. Yeah, so yeah, that's really good. That's one of the big things that gives this speaker an edge over other speakers in its class, is that it's a bookshelf speaker.
Yeah.
That does bass down to 40 hertz, which covers the vast majority of.
And I don't remember exactly, because you had the Revels and the 126 BEs. I would imagine these have an advantage in bass.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, yeah, the Revels didn't extend this low. I think they extended like 50 to 60.
Yeah.
You'd want to use a sub with those. These dig a bit lower, and you don't really need a sub with them, depending on your own tastes, of course, and the room size. But yeah, that's a really cool thing to have. And there's also other advantages, like it's better for integrating with a sub. If you have a sub and you want to use it, well, the port isn't so high in frequency where that phase rotation from the port interferes with the integration of the sub. Because there's an acoustic phase rotation at the port tuning, and like a lot of bookshelf speakers have their tuning frequency at like 60, 70 hertz or 80, right? And that makes it can sometimes make it hard to integrate with a sub, because the sub, is expecting a smooth phase response, and like you can get all kinds of phase conflicts with the sub. The port is tuned so low that unless you cross with the sub really low, there won't be any phase conflicts with the port.
Yeah.
For the sub crossover. So like that's also an advantage, So
I mean, if I was setting this up as a subsat system, I'd probably set it up with a 60 hertz crossover on a sub or two.
Yeah, you could do 60, you could do 80. It's better behaved with the sub. That's one of the advantages of this low tuning frequency. So yeah, and this is.
So let's look at the impedance now, because what's the nominal impedance rating of this speaker?
I think it's 4. And this is a 4 ohm speaker. It
I
doesn't.
mean, they're being honest. The impedance minimums are a little under 5 ohms.
Yeah, it's a 4 ohm speaker. There's nothing to worry about here. It's like, it's a 4 ohm speaker. Most receivers should be able to drive this. Even like you don't need a fancy receiver to drive the speaker well, right? So like, it's just good news. It's a well behaved speaker in the electrical impedance, like that area, and phase. It's pretty normal, actually. There's nothing noteworthy here. There's no bad news here. It's all good news. So that's about what you'd expect. And so like any receiver could pretty much drive these speakers, So
yeah, and the interesting thing is they rate. I was looking at the specs online. They give you the frequency response at 55 hertz to 20 kilohertz at plus or minus 1.5 dB. So that they're giving you really tight tolerances, and then the 3 dB points are at 50 hertz and 20K.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, I think that
they're meeting that.
Yeah, that's not what I measured. I mean, but that might be what they measured. But then again, they measured probably on the woofer axis, so like that might have been a little better. And also different measuring conditions and measuring methods can yield different measurements. So like they might have been able to achieve that in their what were they? I mean, they probably used. Last I heard, PSB still used the NRC anechoic chamber, but they might have their own, or they might have a Klippel thing, right? But anyways, it measures well regardless. So
By the way, they do rate it as a 6 ohm speaker, so the fact that it goes down to 5 ohms is very commensurate of that rating, and I'm happy to see the honesty in their impedance measurement there. And they do. I just look up the price. Actually, they're higher than I said. They're $2,800 a pair.
Oh, 2,800. What was I saying? I think I was saying 24.
And I said 22 because I forgot. So they're under $3,000. So they're still cheaper than the Revels.
Yeah, they're cheaper than the Revels. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, going over the pros of these speakers, like we went over, they have good tonal accuracy. They don't emphasize or de-emphasize any frequency band. It's all, everything sounds like it's supposed to. Low frequency extension is really good for these, especially good, unusually good. The directivity control is reasonably good. I think they look nice. They're definitely not loud looking. The build quality is also very good. They got this aluminum front baffle, and everything is really, I mean, the binding posts are overbuilt, so they're over designed and overbuilt, but that's the only con. Yeah, so like we said, they're just a very tonally accurate bookshelf speaker that does bass, and they're expensive, but they're really good. They're just a two-way. They're just a good two-way bookshelf speaker. That's the bottom line. If you want a good two-way bookshelf speaker that looks nice and doesn't really do anything wrong, that's what these are. So
yeah, and they're built really well, so that does factor into it.
Yeah, here's some competitive speakers kind of in the same price range. There's KEF R3 Metas, which are probably pretty good. I haven't measured them.
Yeah.
Or I haven't reviewed them. Most of these I haven't actually. Some of them I've reviewed. Some of them I've only heard but not reviewed, and some of them I don't have an experience with, but I think would be pretty good. These are competing speakers. Those KEF R3 Metas, which are probably really good. I heard the MoFi Source 0.8s at Xpona. They just launched those unveiled those at Xpona. There's Andrew Jones' latest speaker. They previously had the MoFi Source 0.8, the 10s, I mean, and then they just launched the 8s.
The 10s, I hate to say it, but the 10s are the ugliest bookshelf speaker I've ever seen. They're so massive for a bookshelf that it doesn't even make sense. So hopefully the 8's a little bit better. It's a smaller woofer, but
it's smaller. It has the same aesthetic. So if you're bothered by the 10s, you're probably bothered by the...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
They're probably pretty good though. I mean, Andrew Jones is
to me, when I look at a speaker like that, it reminds me of I'm a BMW fan, but I can't stand the beaver grill, so I will not buy a BMW with a beaver grill. So when I walk in, when I walk in and I see the MoFi speaker, and it might sound great, it might perform well, it's off-putting to me, the aesthetic of it. That's just my opinion.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, MoFi, I would say the MoFi Source 0.8s are in direct competition with these. I don't know how the MoFi. I heard them; they sounded fine, but I don't know how they really. It wasn't like a deep listening, or I don't know how they really perform. So I don't know how they really compare to these. But these are a known quantity, unlike those. Maybe we could get a pair sometime of the MoFi so we could see how they really are.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, these are a known quantity. These are very good. So I mean, I assume those are good. Then there's the Polk Legend L200s, which are I mean, they're not quite the same class because they're almost half the price, but those are so good. So if you want a less expensive and
I'm glad you put them in the comparison, because Polk has been slaying it lately, man. They're between the Reserve series and the Legend series. They've been really bringing their A game on their speakers.
Yeah, these are really good. I mean, so I think these are probably comparable to the Polks. Probably wouldn't quite have the dynamic range. They wouldn't dig quite as deep, but they're still not bad at 50 hertz. And we did a thorough review of the L200s, so you can see how they compare. Going on, yeah, I think those are really good. If your budget is tighter, look at the L200s. The ELAC Vila BS 403s are probably pretty good. Another Andrew Jones project, probably pretty good. I heard the towers of the Vilas, they sounded fine. I wouldn't want to put them in a large room, though. I think they're a little bit constricted in dynamic range because they're.
That's really always been the ELAC with the concentric drivers. They just don't play super loud. They're not super efficient.
These didn't have the concentrics. These had a AMT tweeter.
Oh, okay.
So, but they were fine. I mean, I wouldn't. They're okay. Then there's the JBL L82 Classics. They're like the little brother to the L100s.
Yep. Those are cool speakers, man. I've always been an L series fan.
Yeah,
JDL.
those I would imagine they probably perform pretty. They're good performers, but like those, they would have a very acquired taste with that Quadrux grill. You know, that old-fashioned grill with the kind of like
I would
grid stuff.
keep the grill off on those for sure.
Yeah, some people that's gonna be like you know, that's people are gonna run hot and cold on those for sure. So that's a matter of taste. But I think those would be pretty good. There's the Bowers and Wilkins 706s, S3s. Bowers and
Mhm.
Wilkins has like, I think those would be in a pretty tight competition with these. But Bowers and Wilkins always have had a weird performance target. You know, their crossover has been unusual. So I don't know.
So, in my opinion, with Bowers, because I see a lot of people just rip them apart with the measurements, have people actually listened to them? Because I've heard the newer 700 series, and I was very impressed with how they sounded. I didn't think they were going to sound as good as they did because I know there was measurement nasties in it, but
There always is. There's
it's a
always is
very
Bowers.
pleasing sound. I mean,
I think if you set them up right, they can sound good.
yeah,
But you have to set them up right, and that's kind of a con. That's kind of like a con with the Bowers and Wilkins, that you should have to set them up right to sound good. But I
yep.
mean, people it has its fans, and its voicing has its fans. So like, you know, I would say go audition them, and like to make sure you like its sound. Also in a direct competitor to these are the Paradigm Founder 40Bs.
Those are amazing. That's an amazing series of products. Aside from the LCR, which has some issues with that concentric driver, I heard the Founder 120Hs, and those are one of my favorite tower speakers, especially in that price class. So I could imagine the 40B would be a kick-ass speaker as well.
Maybe, but here's the thing. The bookshelf versions of a lot of the Paradigm series were not on the level of the towers. Like if you look at the Persona bookshelf speakers, the what are the ones you have? Those ones I think the series that you have, the
800Fs.
Yeah, what series was that?
The Premier.
Premiers, yeah, the Premiers, the Personas. For some reason, the bookshelf speakers for the Paradigms, they are measured weirdly compared to the towers, right? Towers are really good, but the bookshelves kind of wacky. I don't know why, but that it is. So for me, I would audition the Paradigms if you were looking at them, just to be sure that's what you want, because I mean, I haven't seen any measures for the Founder bookshelf speakers, but geez, the others have been, I don't think, on the level of the tower speakers for the same series.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving on, the Arundel, it's the same price, but I don't think it's quite the same speaker, and probably
It's a much bigger speaker.
Yeah, they're stand mount speakers. Both these are stand mount speakers, but the Arundels are like much bigger. So like I was kind of debating including those in this like little like competition.
I mean, you got it. It's there. People cross shop, and the advantage of the Arundel is it's THX rated, and it's a larger
It'll have
speaker.
a massive advantage in dynamic range for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
Out of all the speakers, out of all the speakers on the list, that one's
Yeah.
going to play the loudest by far.
Yeah, no, without question. If you're, let's just put it this way: if you're building like a dedicated home theater room, among these, there's no question, get the Arundels. But you know, they're much larger, and they're much heavier, and so like, you know, I don't know how many people would actually be cross shopping these with the Arundels, but if you have the room for them, then yeah, they would present a pretty good pretty stiff competition against the these PSBs. I mean, the PSBs certainly have its own advantages though. Then there's the Philharmonic BMR full monitors, which we reviewed. There's an in-depth review we have of those. Those are really good.
Yeah, you're a really big fan of the brand and what Dennis does with it.
They're just really good, man. I wish every speaker would measure as well and like sound as good as the Philharmonics. So like,
wow,
those are really good. And they're less expensive, but they're larger. So a lot of people might not want as large of a speaker as those, and they look a little unusual in comparison to these. So like, they're worth looking at though if you're shopping in this class. Salk Sound also has the LS 1801Bs, but I mean it's a little different type of speaker because like they're kind of like made to order, right? And there's a lead time with them. But if you want like a handcrafted speaker, those would be probably pretty good. They have a Dennis Murphy crossover. He designed the Philharmonic, so like I'm sure those are really good.
My only concern about Salk is when they've sent me speakers in the past, they sound good, but when you play them loud, you could make those woofers misbehave. The fact that you said that Dennis is involved with this maybe gives me some hope that the speaker is well damped and it's not going to overload the woofer, because that's the speaker I was telling you about that it played down to 40 hertz, but when I went above 75 dB, the woofers were bottoming like crazy.
Salk, well, to get dynamic range from a speaker of that high of a fidelity, it would cost serious money. I think Salk has speakers that can do that, but they're going to be very expensive.
Oh yeah, their towers with those 10s or whatever they use in them. I heard one of their $10,000 or $15,000 pair of towers. I fell in love with them. They were great. They had those drivers that don't have like a cone. They don't have a dust cap. The inverted driver. I forgot who makes those drivers, but they sounded beautiful.
Yeah, for Salk, I mean, you can get really high. You can have fidelity, but when you add a lot of dynamic range for that, it's just going to be really expensive because of like the way they make speakers. And
but their cabinetry blows everyone's away. It's
second to none. Yeah. And then to top off this list, we have the Ascend Acoustic Sierra 2 EX-V2s. I'm sure those are really good. They have really good measurements. I haven't heard them, but I would assume they would sound really good because they measure excellently, and like
they've always been good speakers. Years ago, when the first line of Sierras came out, and we did like a shootout with a bunch of different bookshelves, I found that they were a little laid back in the treble. But then again, some of the speakers we had were really hot. We had some Klipsch in there. Polk at the time were ear bleeders. Those Polk, you remember those? They used to use that foam tweeter, like the polycell tweeter back in the day.
No, I didn't know what model you're talking about specifically.
I'm talking like back in 2010 era. So, but I just remember the Sierras they sounded good. They had really good output, good bass, but they were a little laid back in the treble. But I was also listening to other speakers that were just kind of blaring treble.
Well, Ascend has actually they got one of those like clippable near field scanners, and they have all of the measurements on their site for the speakers, and they measure really well. So like, I mean,
it's been years, so I'm sure it's a lot better than when I heard them.
Yeah. Anyways, that's the PSB Synchrony B600s, and they're good speakers. So if you're looking for a good speaker under like a bookshelf speaker under 3,000 that you don't need to add a sub for, this is a really good choice. I think it's a lot of good news here.
Yeah. Well, there you heard it, guys. James is a pretty pragmatic guy, so he's telling you this is a good speaker. It's a good speaker. And PSB is got a long legacy of making good product. And, they're Canadian-driven company. They're engineering-driven, and they have access to the NRC to do their measurements and analysis. So there's a lot of pros to owning a brand like PSB. And, James, I appreciate you taking the time to taking the speaker outdoors, doing the testing. You did your listening tests. You guys can read more about his listening tests on our site at audioholics.com. I would say, what was like, if I could put you on the spot, what was the most memorable thing you listened to when you had these speakers on? Was there a track that stood out that you said, hey, this sounds really good on these speakers? Do you remember anything that really kind of stood out to you?
I would say, when I was listening, I don't remember the exact album, but I listened to like a full orchestral music, and like I did an A/B comparison of this with and without a subwoofer, and there was hardly any difference. So meaning that these could cover like, and then that's acoustic music with a lot of like low frequency content, and it could do all of that. It could hit all of that, and you didn't need a sub. So like for like acoustic music, you just don't need a sub with these, So that's that.
And some people might not have it in their budget or in their room dimensions to add a subwoofer. So this is one advantage that this small bookshelf speaker has, is it already gives you pretty good bass response, especially if you're just using it for music.
Yeah, I mean, if you can listen to these orchestral music without a sub and not hardly miss anything, that's that's a good case for these, So yeah.
Well, cool. Well, James, I appreciate it. Guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics or ask questions. And until next time, my friends,